A little while back now, a woman came in to see me, and she's 60. She's still working. She actually likes her job quite a bit, so she didn't have any immediate plans to want to stop working at all. She's got about 1.1 million right now in her 401k, and she's still contributing. And she's got about 70,000 in her brokerage account, and about another 30,000 in savings. So altogether, she's got right around 1.2 million dollars. And interestingly enough, one of the first things she said to me was that I keep hearing about Roth conversions. So what's the deal, right? I mean, should I be doing them? And for her, she really didn't have a strong opinion either way. She just shared that she'd been seeing and hearing so much about them from different articles and podcasts and people talking about it and everything else. And so she just wanted to know, whether this was something that would apply to her. So that's the question, right? I mean, does it apply to her? Well, the answer, of course, is that it depends. And so today, what I want to do is I want to walk you through how I actually thought through that question with her, because I think her situation is pretty common. And the answer might not be what you're expecting as I go through this here today, because we actually ended up spending a lot more time talking about something that was completely different. And by the way, if we haven't met yet, I'm Ryan Kravitz. I'm a certified financial planner professional, and I help people transition into and through retirement. So today I'm going to talk about Roth conversions, but specifically for somebody that's around age 60 with about $1.2 million saved. Now, don't expect this to be a full-on deep dive on Roth conversions. I actually have a separate video for that. And if you'd like to watch that, I'll go ahead and put a link to that down below in the description. So that's about 30 minutes long. That's a full-on deep dive. But what I want to do here is I want to talk more specifically about her and for people that are like her in her situation as to whether it applies. All right, so let me go ahead and just kind of quickly recap her situation here. So again, she's 60 years old. She's still working. She plans to retire probably, she thinks, when she's 65 years old. Because again, she likes her job okay, so she's really not in a rush. But she thinks by 65, she'll be ready to hang it up. She's got about 1.1 million in a 401k. She's got about 70,000 in a brokerage account. Cost basis on that, by the way, is about $40,000, which is almost all long-term capital gains. She's got about 30,000 in savings. She has one son, and he's doing quite well financially. So he's not a financial concern for her. Now, her thought was that if she did retire at 65, that she would just go ahead and turn on Social Security then. And so I went ahead and ran a Monte Carlo analysis, based upon that. And she was coming out at more than a 95% success rate. I mean, super high. And really that 95% number is actually where the real conversation here started, because before I could even answer the Roth conversion question, I needed to ask her something which was really much more fundamental. And that's really the key here of this, probably this whole video, everything I'm talking about here today. And that is, what are we actually optimizing for? That's the key. What are we optimizing for? What's important here? Because before we talk about whether to convert, we need to figure out what we're actually trying to accomplish, because really that answers everything. I mean, in her situation, there's really three things that somebody might be optimizing for. So number one would be reducing future RMDs. Right? I mean, yes, of course, conversions can help with that, but so does just spending more and drawing the account down naturally. I mean, her R&D age is 75. I mean, at 75, the factor's only about 4%. It's not this super high, scary number that she was envisioning. And I think that a lot of people kind of envision that number, there's that fear of these RMDs are going to be like so high. It's going to be so scary. It's going to cause all these issues and all these things. But it's only about 4%. I mean, it's not the disaster that a lot of people imagine. And the reason that RMDs really get so big is actually pretty simple. It's just that the account just kept growing faster than it was being spent down. And in her situation, she really didn't have, high. She didn't spend a lot. She didn't have big plans to go on those, annual trips to Europe or whatever else, and just, buy a boat, or I don't know, just spend a bunch of money. I mean, she lived a fairly simple lifestyle. So she just didn't have that desire. All right, now let's talk about number two. So this is another thing that she could be optimizing for, which is for tax-free growth and flexibility for herself later on. Because, certainly Roth money grows tax-free, and then having it gives you more flexibility to help with managing withdrawals and potentially staying under those IRMAA thresholds down the road. I mean, those are real benefits, but they matter most when you actually need to optimize. When the margin is thin and every dollar counts. Because in her case, let's say she was already at 95% exactly right now. So the question then becomes, what are we trying to do? What are we really trying to accomplish? Are we trying to push that 95% up to 97%? Or are we better off just focusing on spending more and actually enjoying what she has saved? Because remember, as a side note, if that number was 100%, what does that number mean? That number means that she has 100% chance that she's going to underspend her resources in retirement. So her plan was super strong. She had a lot of additional spending that she could do. Now, let's talk about number three here. So the third thing that she could optimize for is to leave something tax efficient for her son. And this is a real consideration. And we're going to come back to this one. But here's the thing. For her, is that really her main goal? And so as we were talking through everything, I mean, the answer just kind of kept pointing to the same place. And that's just when I had to tell her that the bigger issue really isn't whether to convert. It's that she's on track now to way underspend her money. And so let's talk about what that actually looks like and what I think she should be focused on going forward. Because again, the real issue for her is just that she needs to spend more. I mean, what she actually wants to live on in retirement versus what she can actually spend is quite a bit different. I mean, she's in a situation where maybe like yourself, I mean, certainly like a lot of people that have been disciplined savers over the years, is that she's now built a habit of not spending. And that habit, it just doesn't turn off at retirement. It's hard to go from, basically or pretty frugal to all of a sudden to be this big spender, right? And I'm not saying she should overspend and be careless, but I think you know what I'm saying. I mean, the goal, again, it's not to be reckless. It's just to actually enjoy the money that she's worked 30 plus years to save. And it's also worth asking, I mean, does it still make sense to keep maxing out the 401k between now and 65? I mean, there's an argument for it for sure. I mean, she's in a higher tax bracket now, so the deduction's valuable. I mean, it probably still makes sense, but it's worth having the conversation rather than just doing it on autopilot. So here's how I actually laid out what I think her retirement looks like if she gives herself that permission to spend. And so rather than just adjusting for inflation, we can actually build in a more generous spending number in those early years of retirement. You probably have heard this before, and whether it's from me or from somebody else or what have you, but generally there's those three phases of retirement, right? The early years, the go-go years, and then the slow-go years, and then the no-go years. And so for her, what we did was we kind of built in those first 10 years. Like if she retires at 65, so from 65 to 75, that would be the time for her to spend more. So we actually needed to make a plan to be able to do that. Otherwise, she would probably just be frugal and not spend it. So, to spend more, those are the most active years, right? And really likely when she's going to get the most enjoyment. So building a plan behind that. And then at age 75 to 85, we kind of scaled back expenses by about 10%. And then at age 85, we scaled back expenses again by about 10%. And when I say expenses, I'm talking about living expenses, not healthcare. I account for that always separately as a separate thing. And here's the key point. I mean, even at age 85, after scaling back her expenses twice, in today's dollars, she's still spending more than what she originally thought she'd want or need in retirement. And so, yes, spending more does lower that Monte Carlo score a little bit, but she's got plenty of room to absorb that. And this isn't just set it and forget it. I mean, for sure. I mean, we'd manage this with a guardrails approach, meaning if spending ever started to get ahead of the portfolio, we then make small adjustments along the way. I mean, it's not a rigid plan. It's a plan that has flexibility. Now, one of the biggest levers in making this work, and one that also creates the most opportunity from a tax planning standpoint, is when she takes Social Security. Now, you might recall earlier I mentioned that she was just kind of thinking that when she retires, she'll go ahead and turn her Social Security benefits on then. And so she retires at 65. She was thinking that's when she would start collecting. But I recommended that if she retires at 65, that she waits until 70. Reason being, it creates a 5-year window where her income will be quite low. And so as a result, she could then intentionally start really drawing down, let's call it from the IRA. Let's assume that she rolls that 401k into an IRA there in the future. So she could start drawing down from that much more so. That, of course, then will reduce her future RMDs because the IRA balance will be lower. And that's also part of the game plan for her to be able to spend more money, especially in those early years of retirement. Now, she could also consider conversions as well if it makes sense. But again, that's something that could be evaluated too in 5+ years from now. Really that window of time, that 5 years is really the whole ball game if you think about it from a tax planning standpoint. Now, on top of that, delaying, of course, means a meaningfully larger Social Security benefit. In fact, the benefit increases at 8% per year after full retirement age and increases almost at 8% before that. So it would be significantly higher if she takes it at 70 versus age 65. And so, of course, that means what? I mean, more guaranteed income for life, which is especially important since in her case, I mean, she's single. There's no spouse's income as a backup here. And so that's important. And another thing is that Social Security is more tax advantaged income. Worst case scenario, only 85% of it is subject to federal tax, not 100% of it. Now, once she retires, she's going to have 3 buckets of money. So she'll have the IRA, the brokerage, and the savings. And the general idea is to spend from taxable accounts first, then tax deferred, and then the Roth money last. But it's not always that rigid in practice. I mean, in her case, the brokerage is smaller, but it's still worth being thoughtful about. I mean, it's only about $70,000 right now. It's certainly going to grow, presumably, right over the next 5 years. It'll become more of a factor. But the IRA or the 401k now is certainly much larger. And so thinking through here in the future, those IRA withdrawals, they are going to be fully taxable. The brokerage account, some of that's going to be a return of basis. So that's not taxable. Some is going to be long-term capital gains. So certainly those tax rates are more favorable. The goal is just to make sure that she's actually using her deductions too each year. One of the big mistakes that I see a lot of times with people that retire is, they've got some money maybe built up in savings. And so they're just kind of living off of that the first year. And then at the end of the year, they owe nothing in tax and feel great. But the problem there is that they didn't even utilize the standard deduction. And so they could have realized some money from their IRA, let's call it, and not have to pay any tax on it. So we don't want a situation like that for her. So it's about, planning carefully and thinking through how much you're going to withdraw and when in order to potentially reduce the total amount of taxes that she'll have to take out over the course of her lifetime. And really, this is year by year thinking. It's not something that will be locked in like right now when she's 60. It's something that needs to be considered at age 65, 66, and so on, right? Every year going forward to actually, make those decisions. Here's the key point. Pulling more from the IRA in those early years actually helps because it brings the balance down naturally and it gives her more control over her tax picture later on. I mean, not to mention, it allows her to spend more of her hard-earned money in those early years of retirement. Now, with all that context, everything I've talked about so far, let's actually answer the question that she came in asking, which was, where do Roth conversions fit, right? I mean, are these something that should I be doing this? And the answer is that they can make sense, especially in that 65 to 70 window. And what makes conversions attractive, of course, is that, during that period of time that's when she's going to have those low taxable income years before Social Security starts. and she's got some money in savings, got some money in a brokerage account, and if she can use that money to pay the taxes on the conversions, then that could be a better thing for her. Also, another key benefit here is that if she does conversions, the Roth money would grow tax-free and will be able to come out tax-free. And there are no RMDs on a Roth IRA. So, if RMDs are really what you're worried about, I mean, that's a good solution. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But remember the three things we said she might be optimizing for. Certainly conversions are most compelling if the goal is to leave something to her son, or she genuinely expects to be in a higher tax bracket later on. So let's actually touch on the son question here a little bit more, because this is important. I mean, from the son's perspective, I mean, certainly if she did conversions, this would be great for him, because, assuming he then inherits this money, he's already doing well. He's already in a higher tax bracket. And so the difference between inheriting a Roth versus inheriting a traditional IRA can really be significant for him. I mean, no doubt about it. But here's the thing, is that really her main focus? I mean, she certainly always wants to do right by him, but, again, this is her retirement. She's worked many years now and wants to continue working. And again, she's going to retire with more money than she's going to actually need. So, I mean, certainly she could make the decision to say, hey, yeah, this is money that I do want to give to my son. I do want to do these conversions. This does make sense. Yes. Or she could decide, over the course of these next few years here, while still continuing to work, maybe until 65, that, yeah, I really do want to be spending down more. Let's create the lifestyle that I want to be able to have. I mean, really, that's what matters here. It all depends on her and what's really going to be most important for her. Now, a few reasons why you might not want to convert. One of them would be if you're converting today and you'd likely be in a lower tax bracket in the future. Another one would be if you need to pull the money from the converted amount to pay the tax. Not necessarily a deal breaker, it's case by case, but that would be another reason why you might not. Certainly another reason why you might not is that if it would trigger ACA subsidy issues, and that this isn't going to be the situation for her, because she's not planning to retire at 65. Now, another thing worth understanding here, and this one catches a lot of people off guard, is IRMAA. And I always say, know it, don't fear it, right? Because you got to know what it is. I mean, IRMAA is the Medicare income surcharge. There's a 2-year look back on your income. So if you do a big conversion, let's say at 63, well, at 65, you're going on Medicare, you could potentially then have to pay higher premiums as a result of that. So you want to know what IRMAA is and how it works and what the surcharges are and all that sort of thing. It's not necessarily a reason not to convert. I always look at it as like, if you're doing a conversion, I mean, you're going to pay more tax, right? You got to factor that in. Well, you might also have to factor in the IRMAA surcharges as an example. So again, it's not a reason to stop. It's just, it's something where you need to go in to the decisions that you're making with your eyes wide open around what it is and what the potential extra cost could be. So in her case, I mean, if she does a larger conversion for, maybe a year or two, and let's say she pays more in Medicare premiums as a result of that, but then maybe she can get more money than into tax-free. I mean, that could certainly be a win for her. I mean, no doubt about it. Or maybe put her in a situation where she likely wouldn't have to pay IRMAA surcharges in the future, as an example. So a lot of factors to consider. So, the bottom line is factor it in. Just don't let it paralyze you in decisions. And then there's the long-term view here. I mean, what happens if she lives well into her 80s or 90s? Delaying Social Security is the first layer of longevity protection, because it's going to provide her more guaranteed income if she lives a long time. Roth money, that's a second layer. I mean, it can really pay off with longevity or certainly when it passes to the next generation. And given how well-funded she is, I mean, it's worth mentally earmarking maybe a portion of the portfolio for future long-term care. Just setting it aside, invested for that specific purpose, because by doing that, earmarking that money for long-term care, it can give her, or possibly you, if that's your situation, more confidence to then spend your other money, knowing that that's accounted for. And that actually, like I said, it makes it easier than to spend the rest of what you have. A couple of other things that I want to briefly mention that came up, and these were reasons to consider not converting, was that number one, she was charitably inclined. She actually gave a little bit of money every year. And I talked to her about QCDs, which she could do at age 70 and a half. Those are the qualified charitable distribution. So I don't want to get into details there, but the bottom line is that there'd be no reason to convert money that she's going to then end up wanting to give to charity. So instead, with the QCD, you can give the money directly from your IRA over to a qualifying charity. It's got to be at 70 and a half. Now, there's rules around. I don't want to get into the details here. But another thing that we talked about, too, was the medical expense deduction. So again, as we were to earmark a certain portion of her money, from her IRA in order to cover medical costs, I mentioned, as I mentioned to her, if she needed long-term care costs and her expenses are high, she would be able to itemize. And so as a result, that could greatly help to reduce the taxes on that IRA when she's drawing it down in the future. Assuming, of course, tax rules and everything stay the same now or stay the same in the future as they are now. So let me bring this all home. Let me, kind of bring it all back together and tell you what we actually decided to do here. So, we didn't build her plan around aggressive Roth conversions at all. I mean, and in fact, it's not something that we're even going to consider doing until maybe she retires at 65. And by the way, she might actually retire earlier. We'll see. But we really just kind of, built her plan around, spend more, delay Social Security, enjoy the years when you're the most active, and the IRA gets drawn down more in early retirement to fund the lifestyle, and that will naturally then just reduce her RMDs, and also if there's room then to do some conversions in the between the ages of 65 to 70 during that window right there, and if it doesn't jump her brackets too hard or cause an IRMAA surcharge or any of these types of things. So we'll look at that, carefully year by year, then maybe do some conversions, but the bigger thing here really is just realizing that she could spend more. A lot of people I find that have been great savers get to retirement, have that mental shift where it's just hard to spend. And even her kind of planning out what she would want to spend and start seeing that it's not nearly as much as she actually could, I think was eye-opening for her. The most expensive mistake I find it's not in converting the wrong amount. It's really just I guess it's really just spending those years in retirement, which could be like 30 years, right? And you're just being unnecessarily frugal because you didn't really know how much you could actually spend and how much you could really enjoy yourself. And so all that said, I'll leave it at that. If you've been thinking about these things, if you want help with this, if you'd like to learn more about how I work with people, how I actually work with clients, you can click on the link in the description down below and learn more and schedule a call there. All right. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.